So Monster Hunter Wilds succeeded in getting me into the Monster Hunter series for the first game in the entire series. But Monster Hunter Wilds really doesn't seem all that wild. In fact, I wish it was a little more wild. But let's talk about it. Monster Hunter Wilds is meant to be an open world Monster Hunter game. Is it? No, it's not. These are contained sections that you go through map by map through the story, you unlock them, then you get into high rank when the whole thing's unlocked, and then you just warp between them for the majority of the time. Can you actually run through them? Yes, but it really just is like a hallway with a loading zone, and it's not all that great. It's not like interconnected, monsters running between sections, chases happening across multiple maps, anything like that. And in fact, not only is it not open world like that, but everything is compartmentalized into seasons and hours too. So what that means is, if you use the resting mechanic to manipulate the seasons or the time, it resets everything. It's not like an existing schedule that runs regardless of your actions, it runs as a result of your actions. So for example, if you change it from the season of fallow to the season of plenty, it completely resets the monsters. If you change the time from morning to evening because you look at the schedule and it says, oh, eventually you're gonna have a monster on your list pop up in the evening, well, that's not how it works. It completely resets the schedule each time you change the time. So this whole day-night season cycle is really kind of an artificial thing that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The next thing is the Sekret. Now, in Rise, I remember that I first got frustrated because I didn't know whether or not I was damaging the monster. And secondly, I just felt like I was chasing the monster around. I didn't know how to slow it down. I didn't know how to stop it from going in between areas or anything like that. Again, I spent like 45 minutes in Rise before I got a little bit frustrated. I had some other game I was playing at the time, so I just never got back to it. But in this game, basically, you just pick your target, you get on your Sekret, you set it to auto move, it takes you to the target, you fight it for a while, the monster ends up moving to another zone, you hop on the Sekret again by pressing the up key, and then you do a bunch of maintenance while your Sekret takes you to the next monster. The nice thing is this is super convenient. You can just sharpen up your tools, use your little grappling hook to snag a few goodies from the surrounding environment, and then just move on and fight the boss again once you get to the new section and catch up with it. But it means that you really don't need to learn the maps. You really don't need to learn much of anything about the environment. You don't even need to be worried about anything in the environment because even the other monsters that are there, you don't have to like tiptoe around them. They might chase you for a little bit, but your Sekret's gonna get you safely to the next area and to the next point where you can fight that enemy. So it honestly just feels like there's no real danger in Monster Hunter Wilds. The only danger is when you're up against the toughest bosses and you do something stupid like you get animation locked in an attack and you get hit by the one strongest one shot for the monster, whether it like flops on you or whatever. And I know that a lot of people have criticized Monster Hunter Wilds for not being very difficult, especially compared to some other ones. Now, I'm interested in potentially trying some of those older Monster Hunter games just to see how difficult they are. Me, being a fan of the Souls games and some of the more difficult types of games you could play, I did feel like Monster Hunter Wilds just wasn't dangerous. The only time that I ever really had a problem is if I got comboed by the monster, meaning like I got some kind of a status effect that I couldn't remove fast enough, or I got knocked down and then I got hit again as I got up, or I jumped onto my Sekret to try and save me, and the Sekret and I both got hit and knocked down and then comboed by the monster. Basically, those are the only ways that I could die in Monster Hunter Wilds, which, again, is not very wild. Now, in terms of the overall story of Monster Hunter Wilds, they do an okay job, but they end up with a lot of issues in terms of character development. There are basically 2 or 3 characters that get developed. One main character, which is Nada, who improves from kind of like the saved kid in the beginning of the game to eventually, I don't know, sort of like a chosen one to try and help save civilization. And he doesn't seem to know a whole lot about his past, his ancestors, those types of things. He kind of learns them over time through the game, so he develops. And then there are a few side characters that you find through the game in some of the locales, and they develop. But your main character obviously doesn't have a past, is just a hunter. And your main assistants like Alma doesn't really develop at all. She just learns about the environment. She doesn't really have a past to speak of. She has nothing that really kind of drives her other than the fact that she's a curious botanist or something. You have Olivia's crew with Eric and Werner, who, I mean, they move the story a little bit, but honestly, they're not gonna do a whole lot. They just kind of pop up from time to time. I think Olivia is probably like the best character in the game, just because she has some kind of personality and she's tough and she tries to fight alongside you, and there's some good moments during the story between your character and Olivia that are kind of like an epic step up kind of moment. But really, other than that, they're super forgettable. They don't develop. They don't have a backstory other than Nada, which basically happens at the beginning of the game. And I mean, there's just nothing to drive these people other than the fact that they're exploring, that they're investigating these monsters. I mean, the characters are pretty much a non-starter. Obviously, the fan favorite's gonna be Gemma, just because Gemma.
Perfection.
Other than that, there's just really not a whole lot to the characters of Monster Hunter Wilds. And I think this is a missed point. For a second, let's just imagine a world where Alma has had her entire ecosystem destroyed because monsters were poached out of existence or something like that, and that led to like the downfall of her environment and ecosystem, and that kind of propels her to get into this position of being one of the people that kind of decides when monsters can be hunted. And it becomes this kind of internal struggle for her to decide whether or not to actually okay you to take on that next monster. Well, that would create some kind of strife, right?
Zeus is in your hands.
Understood.
And pause!
Or let's say, for example, instead of just a nameless hunter who shows up and Fabius puts you in there, you actually do have a backstory. And the reason why you became a hunter was because your town was attacked by specific monsters that were enraged with a frenzy that originated in this land you just wanted to go to and be a part of the group that investigated and actually put an end to this frenzy or the temper or whatever it is. But you have an actual reason for going there. And each time you see a monster that has this trait, you just absolutely have to destroy it. And now there's this back and forth between the hunter and Alma to try and kind of argue it out as to whether or not this particular monster needs to go down. That would just add that little bit of tension that's just lacking from this game. Or imagine you're in a situation where Olivia is really hurt and she can't fight as well as normal, and part of your job is to try and keep her alive. Or, you know, you've got to try and figure out a way to get one of the characters safely out of a zone, instead of everyone is fine, everyone is invulnerable except for you, and you're the only one you have to worry about, and you really don't even have to worry about yourself all that much, especially when you start taking advantage of the decorations and the mantles and getting all this defensive stuff built up and upgrading your armor and all these things. There are very few abilities that can one-shot you as you get stronger in this game, which is fine. I'm not against that as a whole, but again, there's no tension in Monster Hunter Wilds. Pretty much never. There are a few instances with really cool bosses that when you approach them at a low level, they can be scary just because you can get one shot. But there's nothing that really kind of like amps it up and gets it to that next level. There are some super cool things that happen. The cinematics, some of the fights between monsters, the white wraith stuff from the story is cool. Even, you know, kind of the bosses towards the end of the story are pretty cool, and there's some cool moments in there where the hunter gets authorized to fight this monster, which again, I enjoy all that stuff. But none of it was like scary, none of it took a bunch of tries, none of it was difficult, none of it felt wild. And then in terms of the monsters, the fact that you can just hop on your Sekret and go from place to place without a care in the world. The Sekret has no health bar, it can't die, it just gets knocked around and you can hop back on it again. There's just nothing to consider when it comes to traversing the world of Monster Hunter Wilds, which seems insane because in many of these instances, you have multiple monsters fighting each other. It looks like a scene from like Godzilla versus King Kong or something. And that is the absolute strength of this game. But again, they fight for a little bit. There are a few punches thrown or, you know, fire breath or whatever, and then the monsters separate. So again, the coolest bits of Monster Hunter Wilds are like, they have like, you know, the bumpers in bowling on. Sure, it makes it easier to score pins, but it kind of takes some of the fun out of it because there's no danger there. Imagine if another monster coming in made both monsters go berserk, and there was an actual reason to try and separate the monsters. Now, there are some ways to disperse monsters, like using the dung that's laying around and shooting them, and then it stinks or something and they run. But I found there's no real reason to do it over the course of the game. Again, it just seems like a missed opportunity. And I get it. There can certainly be some concerns with Capcom with getting people into Monster Hunter. I mean, look at me. I admitted that I only played Rise for maybe 45 minutes before putting the game down. And Wilds is wildly successful in getting people into the game. Just the early numbers from Steam and the sales numbers just dictate that this is a super success for Capcom, and Capcom is really on a hot streak for these past few years. But I just think there's so much missed opportunity. Now, I know the Monster Hunter series has continual updates. They bring in more monsters. They add things as they go through it. So hopefully they do add some things to high rank that can make it a little bit more intense, make it a little more difficult, make it a little more dangerous. But I feel like the game itself is so tame, it just is a huge missed opportunity. So at this point, I've sunk, I don't know, 60, 70 hours into the game. I'm over level 100 in Hunter rank. I've defeated every single monster, including the tempered monsters, up to, I think it's like 7 or 8. I think it's 8, with 5 stars, solo, just me and the Palico. And so I've played through pretty much everything the game has to offer at this point, and I have enjoyed my time, but it does feel like a game that you can do pretty much on autopilot to counteract some of the negativity. Let's talk about some of the things I really did like about Monster Hunter Wilds. First things first, like I said, it got me into the series. This is the first time something's got its claws into me, and I've really enjoyed it in the Monster Hunter series. Second thing is the monsters are super cool. They are cinematic, they are huge, they are vicious, they attack with these wide sweeping attacks that have huge areas of effect. Even the crappy ones you fight in the beginning can be kind of like a little funny and dopey, but they can still have some cool moves, some cool abilities, and they do serve a cool purpose in the tutorial setting of learning the game. Also, the weapons and the skill sets, they're fun, they're cool, you can kind of specialize in one of them. They add this level of skill expression to the player, which is definitely needed in this game. There is definitely something to getting better with using weapons. Like, the weapon that really clicked for me was actually the Charge Blade, which I found out after I picked it is supposed to be the hardest weapon to learn. But actually, for me, it feels like the easiest one just because I started on it, so I really know it very well, so I can get it charged up. I definitely enjoyed working through some of the different weapons and finding the ones that clicked for me. The cinematics of the game at times look amazing, especially the ones with the monsters. But the game itself does have a tendency to look kind of like dry and, I don't know, washed out. There are certain instances where you are in these cinematic moments fighting against a specific monster in the story, and it does add to the atmosphere, but there are certain weather conditions that really do make the game look like a desaturated, kind of noisy kind of mess. Now, I did play on my PS5 Pro, and it is the best way to play on console, short of having a super high-end PC. I didn't even get into the fact that, again, this is another PC release that has a lot of issues when it comes to compatibility and frame rates and performance, but that's kind of to be expected in the PC space at this point. There just aren't that many games that are released that are like super smooth the moment they come out. And with all the things that are going on with video cards and stuff right now, PlayStation 5 Pro is the place to play this, short of having a super high-end PC and spending a lot of money on it. The nice thing about the kind of auto system of the Sekret is you spend the vast majority of your time fighting monsters, which is what you want to do. It's why you play Monster Hunters, to hunt the monsters. And there are some cool things like the wound system with the focus strikes, taking advantage of weaknesses of the monster, taking a look through all of the resources in terms of the monsters and endemic life and stuff, and figuring those things out, looking for weak points. Maybe there's a particular part of the monster that you need in order to make a new weapon. So you have to look in the guide to see where does that piece come from, and then during the fight you can target that part. Maybe it's the wing of Rathalos or something like that. So you can go and hunt Rathalos and use the system to find a hunt and join it with other people, and they're all attacking the head and you're attacking the wing because you're trying to get that piece to make your weapon or your armor. And like I said, the clashes between monsters, the fights between monsters, the King Kong versus Godzilla moments that you can get during this game are extremely epic and very fun. I just wish they would take some of the guardrails off. Like, I don't need to track a monster for 3 hours to have fun with it, but I probably don't need to just hit the up button on my Sekret and have it track it down. And I wish that monsters actually fought each other to the death unless you separate them. And there was a risk of not getting the part of the monster that you needed because you don't get parts unless you're the one that kills it as opposed to the other monster. And making them have some kind of strategic value. Like maybe you let the two monsters fight, they create some welts, then you break them up by throwing something at them. But just add some depth, add some kind of strategic value to the monsters fighting, to breaking up the monsters, and also make the environments a little scarier. Make the player have to avoid things, or look out for things, or plan a route because, hey, this monster is super dangerous and very aggressive, and if I go anywhere near it, it's gonna get me, so instead of going this way, I'm gonna go that way, you know? So maybe like you can set up a spot where the monster is going to be, right? And then you can kind of see the general area where that monster has been found, and then you can plot a course, but you want to plot a course around certain sightings that have been named. So maybe like an area will pop up with the picture of a monster that says, hey, this monster has been sighted in this area, and you can kind of weigh how dangerous it is to try and run past that monster to get to the one you're tracking. Now, by the end of the game, you're so strong this probably doesn't matter very much, so the only way for this to really be an issue would be if you just amped up the damage on everything and let everything potentially kill you, which could be its own problem. But I just want some kind of tension in my Monster Hunter. I want some kind of strategy and some kind of strategic advantage to actually planning these things out and not just hitting the up button and jumping on the Sekret and following up. And again, I've really enjoyed this game, but there are certainly some things that I would like to see change with Monster Hunter Wilds. Let me know in the comments down below, what do you think of Monster Hunter Wilds? Is it wild enough for you? And what of my changes do you like or not like? As always, this is Pirates for Pirates Gaming saying thank you for watching, and until next time, I will see you there.